America has demonstrated over time a deep sense of fair play and striving to hold itself to a higher standard, frankly, than most nations do. America has been a nation that is willing to deal with truth. That's part of freedom of the press and freedom of speech, willing to seek the truth and deal with truth within society, and not to generate pure propaganda that is completely unreal. Now, we saw examples of that in America's dealings with Saddam Hussein. It was pretty well documented, the way he dealt with information and dealt with defeat, and other nations have. Hitler had no defeats. He was constantly championing the fact that he was victorious. He wasn't dealing with reality. But America has dealt with truth, and that's been a good thing. And that truth has provided a freedom, because when you deal with the truth sets you free. That's a biblical principle, and it certainly applies here. And so we have had a great deal of freedom of economic opportunity and various other kinds of freedom in America that other nations haven't had, and it's been a blessing for this country, but it's been a blessing for others because, as we mentioned before, we desire to export.
Now, when the President and Colin Powell, both of whom are personally religious, will confess before the world America's sins, is this a good thing in the sense that the world will ultimately benefit from a sense that America can tell even the most obscene truths about itself and admit them and turn from them?
It is a good thing, provided it's followed up on, and that problem is dealt with. This or any other problem that comes up, if that follow through is there, so it's not just talk. Other nations, I think it's fairly well understood. We have America is the most powerful military power in the world today, and it can project that at will, but it restrains itself from doing so.
Because of a moral restraint. Now,
moral restraint.
What about legal power? Because there's a power of international law and convention, and the big conflict over the prison Abu Ghraib had a lot to do with whether or not the Geneva Conventions about the handling of prisoners of war was being violated.
Well, America has had a pride in its legal power over the years. That's why we have, and we talk about it regularly, the rule of law, the universality of law that applies to everybody, and it is drawn, this law system, this jurisprudence is the fancy two-bit word for it, but the law system is drawn from the Ten Commandments. And there are some people, the other heart of America, that doesn't like to think about that. The Ten Commandments makes them feel guilty for behaviors that they're doing, but it is based on the Ten Commandments. It's based on the Bible. That's the remarkable thing. Not perfectly based, but it is largely based on Scripture.
In the world that we live in, are the moral powers, persuasion and getting the consensus across the world, and also the legal power of working within an international system where power is restrained even by the United States that has total military power, is that ultimately more important than the military power itself?
The moral power is definitely more important, and here's the reason why, and this is what is not calculated by most. Moral power I equated earlier to being a spiritual power. If you are trying and striving to follow God as much as you understand the true God of the Bible, God will bless your efforts, whether that's an individual or that's a nation. And so if you hold yourself as close to the standard of His law as you can, then He will extend His blessing, and that can't be calculated, in megaton.
In a summary, would you say America is in a crisis of having two hearts, though, with a large part of the population no longer thinking that there really is any such thing as a moral restraint and moral power based on a personal sense of morality, and that extends to virtually everything, even the projecting of American power across the world?
We are a two-hearted nation, and that negative heart, the bad heart, needs to be changed to become a good heart. Change the heart, regain the moral high ground, the spiritual high ground, and we will be blessed, or America will be blessed by God. Any nation will be blessed by God for doing that.
Well, thank you very much, Randy. We are talking about Abu Ghraib and the prisoner abuse, but what it means in terms of a United States that is in real conflict and embarrassed before the world, and its power is challenged from within. Of course, there are these shocking pictures, and I won't really show you many of them. You can see them on the internet, but And tomorrow we do like to deal with the real topics, the most important spiritual issues of our time and of your life, to get you to think about spiritual issues in a systematic way, knowing that this is an old story that's being played out here for thousands of years in terms of whether or not a nation is going to survive. The Good News is a great magazine. It's the finest spiritual magazine, non-sectarian, and published by the United Church of God in the interest of spiritual education all across the globe. It's in 4 languages, but you can get your free subscription, trial subscription to the Good News, see if you'd like to get it for good, without any cost, by simply calling the 800 number you'll see on this ad coming up. And then also, Mr. Stiver has been referring to the fact that the United States and even Britain are spoken of in the Bible. There is a tremendous role that has been played and is being played out at a spiritual level, and it is connected to the Bible. The Bible, as you've heard, is very much a part of the American underpinning. There's, as it were, a wrestling match by the United States to live up to the high standards that Jesus spoke of and that are at the spiritual core of most of these issues internationally as well as in people's practical lives. So you'll see an ad. Simply call the 800 number or go online to tomorrowonline.org, and be sure to stay tuned tomorrow. We'll be back.